Hello, and welcome to another episode of the Beyond the Device podcast, where we explore the life defining moments that shape careers within the medical device industry. We are particularly interested in understanding how people's personal experiences, challenges, or pivotal events influence professional journeys. And as we progress through the conversation, we will eventually land on the question: what is the one defining moment or experience that changed everything for you and set you on the path that you're onto today? Today's guest is an experienced leader within post-market surveillance, quality assurance, regulatory affairs, and compliance in the medical device industry. Her story started in Brazil, and through a series of chance conversations and unexpected turns, has somehow found herself building her career within Ireland's medical device industry. It hasn't been a straight line. In fact, one of the key moments came from simply making the effort to speak to another person in a house share. Yet that conversation changed everything and put her on the path that she's on to today. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce you to Thais Sala. Welcome.
Hi. Um,
Welcome.
Thank you. So how would you like me to kind of give an overview or
Yeah, if you take us back to where your story began, so we start all podcasts going back to early life, where you were growing up. We'll explore early influences and role models. So where did your journey begin?
yeah, so it began in São Paulo. I am from a very modest family, and we didn't have much growing up, but really something that always drove me was kind of I wanted to do something that would cause an impact in the world. So I always wanted to improve people's lives. So when you'd ask people like kids, what do you want to be when you grow up? I would always answer, I want to be a scientist. So this was always my kind of inner calling, I would say. And I've been motivated by it throughout my teenage years and college and then I went into pharmacology and biochemistry and started studying neuroscience and aging processes, again, with a kind of really big motivation. And then at some point in my career, I got really disappointed with funding and that. And then that's when I moved into Ireland and decided to change kind of my life. But I will hold that moment.
So going back to an early age, even knowing that you wanted to be a scientist, was there any exposure to scientists, doctors? Like what took your attention to that early on?
No, I don't know, to be honest. It's always been something I wanted. Like I never wanted to be a doctor or an engineer or any of the common kind of things kids want to be, or a ballerina for girls. Really, no one in my family is a scientist. I have no role model or anything. But I remember, and this is a moment that really marked kind of my early years because everyone laughed at me when I said I was going to change the world, And at some stage, I looked at my brother. He's 10 years older than me. And my mom tells the story. I don't remember it because I think I was 5 years old. And I said to him, I wanted to see him laughing when I was published in a big journal because I found the cure to AIDS, and my mom was like, where did that kid come from, And really, I had to study really hard and kind of overcome a lot because, as I said, we are from a very modest family and they wouldn't be able to pay college, for example. So the best universities in Brazil are public universities, but they are very competitive. So I had
Mm.
to really kind of put some effort into getting into one, or I wouldn't even be able to study. And that was something that I was really like, no, it has to be a public university and it needs to be the best because I want to be within science and I want to do something that will have a meaning. I want to get to the end of my life and look back and say, I've done some good,
Mm.
but never with a role model, no.
Yeah, it almost sounds like you found your purpose so early on.
At
Yes.
5 years old.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So in the academic setting then, were there teachers like your science teachers that gave you encouragement and supported you on that side?
Not much. Again, coming from a kind of a poor family, I didn't go to really brilliant schools or had the chance to be exposed to very talented professors or teachers. Like in Brazil, it's kind of the opposite as it is in Ireland. The schools are private. If you
Mm.
want to have a good kind of basic education, the public schools aren't good. And then when you go to college, the public universities are the best. So it's kind of swapped, right? So I did go to private schools, but they were all kind of on the cheapest side of the coin, right? And then I didn't really. I remember when I was a teenager, I thought, oh, I'm gonna have to work really hard for a professor in college to publish maybe a book, and then my name won't even be on it so that I can learn. And then I found out that it's quite like that to publish papers. You do work really hard for a professor, and but your name is in the paper. But I had a glance of what the career was. I didn't understand it deeply until I actually was going through the steps, right? And that's when I learned it wasn't exactly the kind of romanticized dream I had as a child.
Yeah, it's just a great example of pursuing your dreams that you've had from an early age, and that self motivation to break it down into steps on how you got there.
Yeah.
Um, and I'm sure we'll discuss in a bit more detail that that path probably wasn't linear, and there were some challenges along the way. But I don't think we've spoken to a guest yet that has defined their purpose and their why so early in life.
Yeah, and I suppose it was really funny trying to find the career that would fulfill the purpose.
Hmm.
I remember my grandfather; he loved like those books, like I don't know how you say in English, but like it's the old Google, the books, encyclopedia.
Oh,
Um,
encyclopedia, yeah.
yeah,
Encyclopedia. That's
that's it.
yeah.
So he had tons of different collections of those, and then I remember him when I was 14, 15, giving me a huge big book of professions. Like you have to choose what you're going to be. And I was reading through and trying to find it because I knew biochemistry, kind of pharmacy was in the background, but I didn't know exactly what was the career, what was the course for me. So even choosing, I was between three or four, at the end. And it's so funny because I was between biochemistry, pharmacology, medicine, all of kind of similar, right? And in the end, I found out I could do the same research during any of the colleges, because I knew the research I wanted to do. But I just was trying to choose the course that would bring me to it. And there's never just one
Hmm.
choice, the right one, but at 15 years old, you don't really know that. So,
So what we tend to find is that people have maybe singular or multiple turning points or events in their life that ultimately put them on the path that they're on to today. You've gone from obviously Brazil to Ireland. You've gone out of, sort of academia into an industry. How did that happen? Were there any pivotal events, moments? I think you alluded to something earlier on in the conversation.
yes. So basically, I was into my master's. I had just started it, and I didn't get the funding, the scholarship from the top kind of scholarship providers in São Paulo. That's FAPESP, and they would give you more, like the scholarship was more money monthly. The other one I got was really less, and I couldn't pay my bills basically with the money they were paying me a month. And then secondly, which was the most frustrating, was I wouldn't get the same money in for the research. So I wouldn't be able to do all the experiments I wanted. I wouldn't be able to travel to the congress and conferences I wanted to, which was so frustrated because I devoted my whole life to science. And then when I wanted like that money to kind of foster and invest in myself, I didn't get it. And it was a very difficult time in Brazil, politically speaking. Like we were starting a recession, there was a lot of cutting funds, and I felt I was never gonna achieve that purpose in my life because I felt Brazil is not competitive. It's very hard to get, like, maybe you would have one shot and one experiment during your masters, and the chances of you failing it and not having a result in your report, they're huge when you compare to the likes of Oxford or Harvard, like other universities that have so much more money. I was like, I'm gonna swim and swim and swim, and at the end of my life, I'm gonna look back and say, what have I done? And I felt utterly frustrated at that stage. So I was scrolling through Instagram, and a post came up like, move to Canada. And I took a screenshot of that and sent it to my then boyfriend and said, let's go. And he was like, yeah, let's go. And then we started looking for, let's go to Canada. We paid a solicitor, to go through, am I a critical skills? Can I get a visa? How does that work, etc. And then after a few kind of research, and do we consider the UK, do we consider Australia, New Zealand, etc., we ended up in Ireland because my husband now is his father's Portuguese. So we were like, okay, we need to get married and we need to move. And that was, I had met him for 5 months at the time. And then suddenly we were getting married, within a year and moving abroad. So our whole families were like, what are you doing? You've never got on a plane. And then suddenly you're packing your whole life, abandoning your masters, and moving to another country to do what? We had no plans, but we just came, so that was definitely a big turning point, even though it's not the one that put me on the medical devices area yet.
And that can't have been easy. You were obviously frustrated with the situation that you had. But yeah, moving country, no plan, just get over there. Like, talk us through how you were feeling, what was going on. There must have been some form of plan in like, you've arrived, where have you gone, what you're doing?
Yeah, so we basically gave ourselves a start over. So we saved a lot of money before we moved in, so we would have, enough to kind of find our feet and find a job. But really, my feelings at the point, I was so frustrated because everything I had planned my entire life, all that motive, like all that
Mm.
purpose and determination had gone through the space, like I had no plan B. Like I said, I always wanted to be a scientist. I always wanted to do research. I always saw myself changing lives through finding new things through research. So I I was lost. I was 25 at the time and completely lost. Like I didn't know what was gonna be. So when we landed here, I was at the same time walking on the streets and giving my CVs to Burger King and McDonald's and anything to find any job, and submitting my CV to universities to try and get a PhD or something in the academic world because I still had some shred of hope. My career was there, but at that time I was completely lost. I didn't have a plan for my future.
Yeah, and like, I have conversations with people that are sort of stable in a job, and the thought of leaving that job to change, do something different, there's risk involved. But they're comfortably living in their country, they're in a stable job in a good company, but they just need a change. What you've done is just said, my frustration is so high right now,
Yes.
I don't care what I'm walking into. So
Yeah.
it's a brave move to do it.
Yeah.
So you've obviously handing in your CV everywhere. What happened at that point? Did you get a job in McDonald's or Burger King?
No, because
No.
I
Okay.
was so silly that I was giving my CV with my whole academic background to McDonald's. Like, how would they hire me? Like I've no experience with customer services or anything like that. But my whole experience is with rats and mice within a lab. So yeah, no, I did not get a McDonald's job. I did get some child minding because I've always been really passionate about kids. And it was an easy kind of thing. So I worked as a childminder for a while, but I think if we get to the turning point, and I don't know if we're there yet, can I?
Yeah.
Because I think I'm there with my story. I mentioned to Nathan when we were chatting about the podcast. Basically, when we moved in, Ireland was going through and still is a huge house crisis, and everyone was telling us how difficult it was to find an accommodation for you to live in. So we gave ourselves a month. Like I said, I don't want to go with 1 week of accommodation. I want to go comfortably, to find a place we can live in. And then we wanted to stay in an Airbnb because hotels were just too expensive. So I had three options at the time of houses that were okay, kind of located, prices were within the budget, everything matched. But my order of priority basically was if we got the whole house for ourselves or if we had to share the house because we were just married, just moving countries. We didn't want to really share the house. So then option A was the house by ourselves. I think the couple were traveling for summer. And then the house was there in Airbnb. So I felt we had a really good chance. And at the time, Airbnb, the host had to accept you and they declined us. They refused us. And I was really like, okay, I still have two more houses to go, in my planning. So at that point we had the flight booked, so I was like, I don't want to take chances. I'm gonna book house B and C. And then I got a message from Airbnb saying those weren't refundable. If both accepted us, we would have to pay for both. And I was like, oh crap, what have I done? And then house B declined us again. So I was like, okay, I only have one, and it's my plan C. So it's the shared house in a not as close to the center location shape. But look, we'll go with that if they accept us. If not, we're back to square zero. I might need to go to a hotel. I don't know what's going to be. And they accepted us. And that house was a room. They were a retired couple, of Irish couple. And they were so nice. Like it was the best thing to be rejected twice, and be accepted by the plan C. I remember, as I was saying, we were going out every day with our printed CVs under the arm, kind of distributing. And after a whole day of no's and no's, we would come back, and the lady, she would make us a cup of tea, and say like, "Oh, what's meant for you won't pass you by. Like, do not worry. You're just your first week here." And it was a good kind of exposure to learn even where to go. Like they were giving us tips, like maybe you can try some auctioneers, or maybe you can try here or there, this area, like it was really good to come back frustrated at the end of the day and talk to them. But then there was this one day that their son was visiting and we had nothing to do. So we were having a cake and a cup of tea and chatting to him and telling him our story, like sharing our frustrations and stuff. And he goes like, "Oh, what do you work with?" And I was like, "Oh, I've only worked in academic research." And my husband then goes talking about his story. And he used to work in insurance his whole life, And then this guy goes, "Oh, I know someone who works in insurance. Do you want to give me your CV?" And then we gave him his CV, like fair, like let's see, But finding a job in your area, if you talk to a lot of Brazilians, you see it's something we only achieve years and years after. We moved in. So we were like, yeah, fine, we'll just do it. And then it turns out this guy knows the head of HR in an insurance company, and she calls him for an interview, and then he gets the job. So a month after we moved in, we didn't have a house yet, but he was working in his area, and then his boss then knows someone who works in Abush, and that's how I get in medical devices. I did not know my first role was in technical services. I remember going into the role interview, and she was like, "Oh, what do you think you're going to do here?" And I was like, "I have no idea. I've never worked with a computer before." But it was really plan C of the fifth country we considered moving in on an afternoon, talking to a random person that his life, my husband's life, got to find and my life got to find. So yeah, that I think is the big kind of turning point in my life.
And that turning point, whilst it on the surface it looks quite obvious, but how did that influence the rest of your career up
Yeah,
to this point?
I suppose I saw this video from Steve Jobs back in Brazil. I used to teach English for kind of extra income, and I used to show that in my lessons and stuff. And I never kind of quite felt it in my bones, even though I liked the speech. But he's talking to Stanford in their graduations, and he tells them a lesson of life, and he goes about you cannot join the dots looking forward. You can only join the dots looking backward, right?
So true.
So it's that kind of at the moment talking to that guy, having some tea at the table of an Irish couple. We never thought that was gonna define our whole lives.
Hmm.
And I remember her telling us daily, like, what's meant for you won't pass you by, and I'm not religious or anything, but when that whole thing happened, I was like, Jesus Christ, like it is true how you cannot connect the dots looking backward. So it really defines that point of when something doesn't feel right, or when you want to move or do something brave and you're scared, you need to think you will never be able to connect the dots looking forward. So you cannot control what's going to happen, the what if, and that has taught me one of the most important kind of lessons in my life so far.
It's such a good lesson.
Yeah.
I'm going to writing that down in my phone as we speak.
Yeah. Do
um,
do watch that speech from him. I think it's a 2005
yeah,
speech in Stanford. It's brilliant. It's 15 minutes long, but it's amazing. I love it.
yeah,
But yeah, the what's meant for you won't pass you by.
Yeah,
yeah.
Love that.
absolutely.
So looking back, because again, when you're in that, you are just focused on looking forward and things worked out. But there must have been feelings and emotions and doubt during that time. You're coming back, and a good cup of tea solves everything. We know that.
Yeah.
But because at the same time of looking for a job, what direction your career is going to take, you're early in a marriage in your mid-20s in a country the other side of the world, so that must have really built that resilience muscle, and things work themselves out. But if you can take yourself back to how you were feeling there, because a big part of this conversation is
Yeah.
the tools and habits that you have in place to manage your mental health and your well-being. So if we take you back to how you were feeling then, and maybe things that you put in place since, but how was your mental health and well-being at that time?
Oh yeah, I think we were so into kind of things have to work out, that we didn't have a lot of time to think about anything else. And in the middle of everything, all this, sorry, I got pregnant. So
Ah.
there was an added kind of I had no idea what's going on. We were less than 6 months in when we got that positive result, like a year married, and we were just I remember the first month where we had our income paying the bills, and we by changing jobs and stuff, we were emergency tax. So we were literally at some point in Lidl with like coins, like, oh, I got a rice. Okay, €1. Like kind of counting coins
Mhm.
because we didn't have a lot left in Brazil. And then that 1 month where we were like, okay, we have €50 left in the bank account. We are not counting coins in the grocery shop. I got the positive result, So it was so one after the other, moving
Mhm.
in and trying to get a job and trying to get a house and trying to understand and making friends and missing home. And it was, and getting pregnant that I don't know, like it was so like an avalanche that I didn't have time, like we were definitely, I can look back and see how scared we were and how fragile things were, but we were just so focused in this has to work
Mm.
that we just stuck our heads in and made it work, But then I remember 1 month when we moved into Galway because we were both gonna start our jobs there. Um, uh, the house they had these gas bill, and because we were a tenant we had to pay €250 of deposit that we didn't have that money, and we were arguing so much, between ourselves, like we didn't have 250 to put in deposit, because then we wouldn't be able to save money for when I went on maternity leave. And like, it was a very low moment in our relationship, like,
Mm,
I feel when money lacks, like, everything is a point for you to have an argument and feel
mm,
stressed. So it was definitely not linear and all kind of flowers, right? We had really low points in that, and it was really hard. But I suppose that kind of will, that always moved me, kind of pulled us as well out of that, because then months came in, money started trickling in, we paid the deposit, we saved our gas bill, and all of that, and things kind of ease. It's always waves. You're never low for your whole life. You're never high for your whole life. It's always going to be ups and downs. So that was definitely phases on that early journey that we felt, what are we doing here?
yeah, yeah.
Mm.
I get it. It reminds me of the quote, "This too shall pass." When
Oh yeah,
when things are low, it'll pass. When it's the good times, it'll pass.
yeah,
Um, we usually talk about support systems and people that you lean on, and we will. But I think your story, it shows that if you've got a clear purpose and a clear why, a clear direction, that's transcended everything for you from an
yeah,
early age. It's just you've been so clear on that any obstacles that have been in your way, you've been able to overcome because you're so clear
yeah.
on the direction you wanted your life and your career to go.
Even
Um,
when how I would achieve that was so blurred,
mm,
because I didn't have a plan B, as I said. Like, it was really, when I thought about working behind you desk the whole day, that didn't show me how I would achieve my purpose, how I would impact people's lives. And for a moment, I thought this whole thing was gone, that I was just going to be an ordinary person, doer, doing my job and getting my pay. And this was life now. But even then, that never abandoned me, because that will of, no, this is not enough. My work is important. I need to do something. This is what got me moving through the ladder as well. And that's how I'm here today.
yeah, yeah, and that was going to be my next point.
Yeah,
Sometimes you can feel like you've reached that goal. You're working in an industry that is fulfilling your ambitions to be a scientist, to do life changing work. And then maybe the career starts to plateau. You're in an organization with perhaps not the best culture. Like there could be a lot of external influences where you just accept it because you've then got responsibilities outside of work.
yeah,
But it feels like even with that, you've then broken through those to then still pursue opportunities and other projects that are going to take you further.
definitely. Yeah.
Amazing.
And yeah, and so looking at the turning points that you've mentioned, so you've got the you've got the disappointment earlier on with the funding. You've then got the conversation over a tea.
The pregnancy was definitely the third one.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So with those turning points, how have those shaped the way in which you actually do your work on a day-to-day basis? You've had your break into the industry, you've progressed, you've gone to work for different companies. Like how has that impacted the work that you actually do?
Yeah, I suppose it builds resilience, right? Because when you know you've gone through a hard and a low, so low, and you've made out of it even better than you were before, when you're facing a challenge, you can look back and say, I have a tracked history of
Mm,
overcoming challenges and coming out at the end of the road better than I was when I started it. So this is just another one, right?
mm.
Things start feeling like, oh my God, this is, I suppose that comes with coming out of the early 20s as well, where
Yeah, yeah,
everything is
yeah.
so big and the end of the world and all of that. And but now when I see a point where I'm like, I don't know what to do, I feel much more equipped and much more prepared to deal with that situation because of everything I've gone through. It's never been easy, but I've always handled. So it's just another one. It's one more. Definitely builds that resilience within you.
Mm. And looking forward, you know, I imagine you've still got the pull. There's still the desire to achieve more things. I can guess that you're not finished in any shape. You're probably just starting. So
Oh
what
yeah,
does the future look like for
yeah,
you personally, professionally? What's on the cards, do you think?
yeah. Look, I don't know, to be
Of course
honest,
not.
because
You can't plan forward.
you cannot connect the dots looking forward, right? So, kind of letting go. I think that's another thing I've learned, right? Letting go of the control and thinking you need to have everything written down of how things are going to be, which is what I had done to date. And then seeing everything just get smashed and having to rebuild and restart. You just learn you're not in control. You just need to leave. And that gives you some light, kind of, like it's not so heavy. But I do see, like, as I said, all the choices I've made when I moved employment, they've all been driven by the impact of the device that we are working on. How can that change people's lives? How can my position influence that? And how can I shape that future within the company? And with that, I've been moving from large organizations to smaller and smaller and smaller so that I can get that footing quite early, right? Um, and not just be expected to be a doer and do my job, because this is just not me. And I am in a really small startup now where we want to get our device to the market, and I really want to be part of that. Right now, this is my big motivation. It's like look back and say, I've done it with a brilliant team. We managed to get a device in the market, and I can see how many lives we are changing, with this technology, how we are impacting that. And this company is developing a device for newborns, and I have 2 kids now. So that's really kind of saying, okay, it's so scary, that moment in time when you become a parent, and I had the luck to have everything going smoothly. But when you don't and issues occur, having the backup from medical devices is so important. That can help that kind of early diagnostic phase and early intervention happening, that I feel and I believe that the device has a massive chance to cause an impact, right? So right now, if you ask me, this is my biggest purpose, is to see that coming through, and we are working really hard. But if you think about future, and I'm just getting started, yeah, maybe own my own company one day with a bunch of innovators, and kind of get that thing from the ground. It's not something I don't consider.
And like just on that idea, do you have any specific therapeutic areas, any medical device types, any area that interests you over others that, or sort of second to that is what excites you most about the industry that we work in? Yeah, that's kind of a
Yeah.
two-part
Um,
question.
yeah. So I suppose what the type of device, it's funny, and I suppose it's natural. It's always brain, right? If
Mm,
I bring you back to my early research, I was studying the aging process and neuroscience. So I always come back to the brain.
that
The company I was working before was also stroke led. The main devices they had, now it's brain injury in neonates. So I find the brain just fascinating, and it's an untapped market. There's tons of different devices for cardiology. There's a lot of research put into a lot of other areas, but the brain is another kind of researched area, and I feel there's a lot of potential for medical devices to support that, as we learn with science what works in clinical. So I
I
answered one part, I suppose, or did I answer it completely?
I think yeah,
c- c-
yeah.
covers both, I think. And I'm sure you've said it out loud now. I'm sure if there is ambition for you to have your own company and product at some point in the future, I'd happily put a bet that you will get there based on
Yeah,
current performance.
yeah. I
Um,
remember I had a manager in Baxter, and she once looked at me and she said, I was wired differently. She said, You are, I've never met anything like you." And I was like, "Yeah, that's me. I'm just getting started." And I'm always like that. I'm on a 200 miles per hour train, and I'm not stopping.
And I'm sure from in a work environment, even at home as a parent, as a partner, that's infectious to be around. Um, Teams need more
Important. We
people
have a
like you.
CAPA system at home, so
Mhm.
So it kind of brings us to the end of the conversation, and there's so many lessons and takeaways. But if you were to leave our listeners with one lesson from your journey, what would that be?
yeah, I suppose we did cover it, but that need for control, I suppose, coming at an early age, you feel like if you don't have anything planned or everything planned, you won't get there. I remember that feeling of I cannot get into retirement age, looking back and thinking I hadn't accomplished anything. To me, wasn't a life worth living, and to achieve that, I wanted to have everything written down step by step, right? And when the first plan shattered, I felt so lost I moved country, right?
Mm.
And I started it all over without any plans. And now I think it's that kind of you are not in control. You cannot possibly have everything planned. Things will happen that will shatter your plans. You need to be able to pivot. You need to be able to start over. So having that biggest kind of the end game, the what do you want to do in your life? What do you want to see when you look backwards? That's what motivates you. Everything in between will get you there, but you
Mhm.
cannot have everything planned out. It's not going to happen. You're just going to get frustrated.
Amazing. Well, thank you so much for sharing your story, and it confirms something that we always say, that opportunities are connected to people. And I think in a lot of ways you create your own luck. Um, so that brings a close to another episode of Beyond the Device. Thank you all for tuning in. Please like, share, and subscribe, and we'll be back next time with another episode. Thank you.
Thank
Thank you
you.
very much.